From Bishop Ireton High School, it's Real World Wednesdays, a show featuring alumni and friends of the school for the Cardinal community and beyond. I'm Josh Goldman, Director of Communications and Marketing, and a member of the BI class of 2006. And on the show today is Ryan Fannon, Bishop Ireton class of 1989, whose decision to attend Bishop Ireton at the last minute changed the trajectory of his entire life. If you tuned into this episode of the podcast and are wondering why you're hearing a different voice at the top, it's because for this episode, we wanted to turn the tables on our regular host and interview him. Our astute listeners have probably noticed that in celebration of our 60th anniversary at Bishop Ireton, we're interviewing people from different decades of BI's history. We started the year with an interview with a 1940s SMA graduate, followed that with a 1960s BI graduate, and interviewed 1970s graduate, former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell in our last episode. When we were determining who might be a good fit for the December episode, we thought there probably isn't anyone better than Ryan Fannon, current Associate Director of Advancement, BI class of 1989, the regular host of this podcast, and a lifelong Cardinal. So for this episode, you're stuck with me. Ryan was born in Alexandria in 1970 to loving parents and an older brother. His mom was a professional actor, and his dad was a former college football player at the University of Virginia, whose career was in the insurance and financial planning business. Though he attended St. Mary's in Old Town from 1st through 6th grade, he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his older brother Frank and decided to switch to St. Stephen's, now St. Stephen's and St. Agnes, for 7th and 8th grade. Despite nearly attending high school there, he made a last-minute decision with the full support of his parents to attend Bishop Ireton, where he started as a freshman in 1985. Little did he know that that one decision would change the entire course of his life. Ryan was heavily involved at BI in a number of different activities and was deeply influenced by the many teachers and staff at the school. Following graduation, he attended Villanova University. His foray into student radio and an internship with the athletic department ultimately led to a role as a commentator for Villanova football and a full-time job in marketing for Villanova athletics. After 7 years working there, the itch to return back to Alexandria grew strong enough that he returned to Virginia, while simultaneously keeping his ties to Villanova. It was that move home that led to him meeting his now wife Laura while emceeing a Bishop Ireton event, getting the head golf coaching job in 2007, and ultimately being offered a full-time role at BI on the advancement team in 2010. While working at Bishop Ireton, Ryan has been heavily involved in fundraising for the 41,000 square foot academic center, which opened in 2020, and the St. Francis de Sales renovation project, which is set for completion in early 2025. If you've met Ryan, you almost assuredly know of his passion for Bishop Ireton. It radiates in every fiber of his being. He'd gladly talk about Bishop Ireton all day if you let him. But getting him to talk about himself? That's a different story. His humble nature is a direct result of his upbringing and the influence of his parents.
My dad was in the insurance and financial planning business, and my mom was a professional actress. It was a wonderful childhood growing up of a lot of excitement. I remember coming home from school and we'd turn on the TV and my mom would be on a commercial, and my buddies at school would be like, "Oh, we just saw your mom on the Ponderosa ad, or we saw her on the Safeway ad, or we saw her on, one of the Jell-O ads," and it was just so fun. She did a lot of theater, and I just remember that big personality my mom had, being an actress, and did so much work at the Little Theater of Alexandria down in Old Town. And my dad was always there, the staunch supporter of the family and my mom's and her career. And my mom, for a while, would go up to New York and did a lot of national commercials and some work out of New York. And my dad always supporting the family with his great business. People often say that because my dad played football at UVA back in the 50s and grew up, we were huge sports fans going down to Charlottesville, Virginia so much as kids. People say, "Now, are you more like your mom or your dad?" And I always say, well, I got the love of sports from my dad and I got the ham from my mom.
You went to St. Mary's in Old Town for grade school from 1st to 6th grade. And for our listeners, that is now the Basilica School of St. Mary's. But when you went there, it was just St. Mary's School. And then you went to St. Stephen's for 7th and 8th grade. How did you end up at St. Stephen's? So tell us that story about the going from elementary school at St. Mary's, then going to St. Stephen's.
I think, as we all know, when you have an older sibling, you have that looking up to your big brother, your big sister. And I had a really good experience on Green Street at St. Mary's, 1st through 6th. I had a lot of great friends, but my brother, who was 2 years older than me, Frank, had been at St. Stephen's starting in 3rd grade. And I think I was always really curious what it might be like to go to St. Stephen's. And I figured, well, if I can go there 7th and 8th grade and see if I like it, and then that would be an option for high school, or who knows where I would eventually end up at high school. Obviously, Bishop Ireton was definitely going to be one of those that was going to be considered. But that's sort of how it happened, really following, as you say, my big brother up to St. Stephen's, now St. Stephen's and St. Agnes, of course.
I remember my sister wanting to do the same things that I did because I was the older sibling, but I want to get to the turn to Bishop Ireton because it's an interesting story. But before I do that, I wanted to point out that anyone familiar with Bishop Ireton has probably heard the Fannon name. And for those that aren't familiar with the school, the field at the school bears that Fannon name. So I want you to explain to our listeners here who the field is named after and how that came about, because I know that this person, despite him passing away just before you were born, was a huge influence in your life, in your family's life.
Yeah, my grandfather, Francis Fannon, was a devout Catholic, and he was really excited about a Catholic high school opening up in Alexandria. And we've had our family business, TJ Fannon and Sons, heating and air conditioning and coal back in the day, and it's been around since 1885. And he was one of the, now it's 4th generation, but he was the 2nd generation to run that business. And he was just a guy that always wanted to back big things in Alexandria that he really had a strong feeling about, and Catholic education was one of them. And with his work with the school in a lot of different ways, the school would eventually name the field in his honor. So it was something that I have his picture in my office still here. I look at him all the time, and he still inspires me when I think about what he did for the Alexandria community during his lifetime.
Okay, so you hear that and you think, no brainer, Ryan is going to head off to Bishop Ireton. But listeners might be interested to find out that you almost didn't come here. It was sort of a last minute thing. So tell us about getting to Cambridge Road for the first time.
I was literally about a month from starting my freshman year in high school at St. Stephen's. Overall, I had a good experience there. I had followed my big brother up there. Academically, sports-wise, I was enjoying it. But there was something in my gut that told me that it wasn't maybe the perfect or the right high school for me, but it didn't come to me until literally 1 month before the start of high school. And I remember talking to my parents, and I'm saying, I'm not feeling this, and it's probably too late. And I'll never forget the support my parents gave. And my dad said, you know what? I don't know if they're at capacity. Let's go up and see if we can have a chance to take a look at the school. And at the time, Father Walsh was here at Ireton. He had been at Ireton for about 5 years. And that was the summer of 1985. And we came up, and I remember Father Walsh was amazing. He gave my dad and I a tour. He said that they did have some openings. They checked my record, and they said, you know what? We have a space here for you if this is something that, your family and you, Ryan, want to decide. And I remember coming home, and I was like, Dad, I want to do this. And I'll never forget this. My parents were amazing. They said, if this doesn't work out, remember, you can always go back to St. Stephen's, because I know overall, you had pretty good experience there, and it's a wonderful school in its own right. So for me, that was how it ended up that I started at Bishop Ireton in the fall of 1985.
That's pretty amazing because, I don't think at the time you were thinking that, you wanted it to feel right for high school, but you probably weren't thinking that this is going to change the trajectory of my life. And yet it ended up doing that. And we'll get into a lot of that. And so I'm so glad to hear that your parents were so supportive because, that's not the case for everybody, and it was for you, and that's amazing. So, okay, so now you're at Cambridge Road, you're at Bishop Ireton, and this is a big period in your life. It's a big period for a lot of people going through high school. So we'll cover the highlights here, but can you talk about some of your best memories from high school? What was it like here at Bishop Ireton in the mid-1980s? I know you played golf all 4 years, varsity golf at Bishop Ireton, and you also gave freshman football a chance. So tell us about some of those memories.
I remember that the Oblates were incredibly supportive, and there was such a huge presence. So many Oblates were at the school. We had lay teachers, but we also had a ton of Oblates, and they really invested in you beyond the classroom. They really wanted you to excel in all ways, and that faith component was a huge part of it. And I just remember feeling like, wow, this entire school has my collective and everybody's collective back in such a unique way. Even as a young kid at the time, I just remember feeling a great sense of community here right away from my freshman year. And that experience of playing varsity golf for 4 years, it was unbelievable because I grew up playing like 150 days a year golf, and I just loved golf. And I so wanted to play in high school and to get a chance to do that. And I'll never forget, literally, when I look back at high school, my senior year, we went down to Fort Eustis, down in the Tidewater, Newport News area, and we won the Catholic State Golf Championship in 1989, and we beat O'Connell by 2 strokes overall, barely, and just to beat our biggest rival, because you wanted to beat O'Connell. Like people say today, what are the biggest rivals of Ireton? Back then, it wasn't even close. We wanted to beat O'Connell the most. They won a lot, and when you beat them, it was an incredible feeling. So that was a big, big highlight. And then playing freshman football, Chip Armstrong, who would go on to have an unbelievable coaching career at Ireton as the varsity coach, 2 different stints. He was the freshman coach in the fall of 1985, and we had a winning season. And I just remember we loved playing for Coach Armstrong, and we had an unbelievable season. And I got to go back and play St. Stephen's at St. Stephen's, and we won the game. And I remember seeing all my old classmates after the game, and it was pretty sweet getting that W just about a mile away from Cambridge Road.
That is pretty cool. And I will say the rivalry with Bishop O'Connell is still to this day. So, hey, a win's a win. Doesn't matter what the margin of victory was. A win's a win. Okay, so I want to ask about your memories with some of the faculty, because you mentioned the influence of the Oblates here. But before I do, I've known you for a number of years now, and I only recently heard the story, and I thought it was fascinating, so I have to ask you about it here. When you were a senior, you auditioned for and were cast as not just in any role in a theater production, you were the lead in the school's production of Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. You got to share this experience with us, because I've known you for a while, and I had no idea that you also had theater in your background. I know you must have gotten some of it from your mom.
No question, but I remember when Father Kowaleski, an oblate who was a big inspiration to so many of us at school, he really just invested his heart and time in so many of us, an incredible man. He said to me, Ryan, I think you can do this role. I think your personality would be a good fit for this role. I can see you doing well in this role. I really want you to try out. And I remember it was the fall of my senior year, and I was so into golf and my friends and getting ready for college. I just was like, I don't have time to do that. And looking back, it was one of the greatest decisions I ever made, because I had to step out of my comfort zone. My mom didn't really push extremely hard, but she really encouraged me. And Father Kowaleski was the one, I think, that took me over the top to step out of my comfort zone and just go for it. And I remember as the play started, I remember being at home, and my mom at some point, it was like a week or 2 in, and I really had to have my lines memorized, and I didn't. And she's like, Ryan, you like to talk off a cuff. You like to go with the flow. Like, you can communicate for a high school senior, but there's no getting around this. You have to memorize these lines, and then you have to build the character. And I remember that moment when I was like, there's no getting around this. I mean, I literally just had to really focus on the time it was going to take to memorize those lines and develop that character. And no question, it was a big moment in my life looking back, where when you do things that are uncomfortable, it really allows you to grow as a person. And I'll never forget that experience here at Ireton. I put that up there right at the top with all the wonderful relationships I had with teachers and students. And then, of course, the 4 years of golf that were the top of it. And I'll have to say this, when I played 1 year of football, I was so skinny that all my buddies were huge football players. And I remember after my freshman year, I'm like, I'm going to end up with like 42 broken bones if I continue my football career. I was so skinny. And I think that time it was time to stay with golf. And little did I know, theater down the road.
That's really cool. And that's something I want to make sure that people understand about Bishop Ireton, because this school is amazing for a lot of different reasons. And I think you can attest to this too. And certainly sounds like it from your experience when you were here. But you can be involved in a number of different things. You don't have to just do one thing when you're at Bishop Ireton. So you weren't just a golfer. You had the opportunity and the encouragement to do more than that. And I think that that's probably still true today. Would you say so?
Absolutely. I think one of the things, whether it's sports or just all the clubs, Bishop Ireton always encourages participation in so many different ways. And that helps us all to become well-rounded and just be able to see a lot of different experiences. And, you were asking about some of the faculty as well. I mean, my advisor for 4 years was a legendary Hall of Fame faculty and staff member, Phil Grimes. And I remember him and the impact that he had on me and so many other teachers. I was just thinking about this, legends of the school, Mr. Jasper, Mr. Umbeck, Brother Rick Wilson, Mr. Basquette, Mr. Bocavage, Mrs. Folletti that just recently retired and is still giving back to the community. Bob Valent was my golf coach. I talked about Father Kovaleski and the principal at the time, Father Walsh, and the assistant principal that would become the principal after Father Walsh left, Father Metzger. I mean, these are people that just had an incredible impact on my life and so many students at the time. And I was the second to last class of all boys in 1989, graduating. And then, of course, one more year, all boys, the 89-90, and then St. Mary's Academy closing their doors, and then Ireton opening their doors. And obviously we went co-ed in 90-91. So it was just an amazing time back in the late 80s being a Cardinal.
And what's really interesting about that is that a lot of those names you named, we are 17 years apart, graduation years at Bishop Ireton, and a number of those people were still teaching when I was here, which just goes to show you the impact that this place has had not only on the students, but on the faculty as well, because they wouldn't stick around if it wasn't a special place for them. So when you mention, Mr. Grimes and Mr. Jasper and Mr. Umbeck, I mean, I had all those teachers just like you did. And that's amazing because they had an influence on me just like they had on you as well. All right. So it is 1989. You graduate from Bishop Ireton. You head to Villanova University in Philadelphia. And anyone who knows you probably knows two things about you: your passion for Bishop Ireton and your passion for Villanova. We'll come back to how you stayed connected with Villanova in just a bit, but before that, tell us how you originally decided to head up to Philadelphia and become a Wildcat.
Because I had mentioned earlier, growing up as a kid, we'd go down to Charlottesville, Virginia all the time because my dad had played there, and we were back in the early 80s, the great Ralph Sampson basketball player at UVA era. But I remember feeling like by the time I was about a sophomore in high school, I felt like I almost graduated from UVA. We had gone to Charlottesville. It was like a second home for us. My dad went with a good friend of his, Lou Donatelli, who was a Villanova grad, to the national championship game on April 1st, 1985 in Lexington, Kentucky, when Villanova beat Georgetown and Patrick Ewing in one of the greatest national championship games ever played. And I remember that night watching Villanova beat Georgetown, and Villanova sort of came on my radar. And then I always thought to myself, wow, that would be an amazing school if I ever got an opportunity down the road to apply and go to Villanova. And there it was. It all worked out that I ended up becoming a Villanova Wildcat. And when I think about, that choice to attend Villanova, and I think about my time there, I mean, it was just an amazing community, faith community like Ireton. Villanova had that as well. Friends that you make for a lifetime. They had sports. And what I loved too was it was about 11, 12 miles outside of Philadelphia. So I had that growing up here. Alexandria, near DC. I love being near a major metropolitan city, but not in it. And that was another one of the reasons I looked and chose Villanova, along with all the other reasons I mentioned. And it was just a wonderful choice and a school that I have a great passion for.
That's so funny because my dad also went to UVA, and I grew up going down to Charlottesville a lot. And then by the time it was time to go to college, I thought, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to try something different because
Exactly.
I'd been down there so much. But no shade against UVA. It's a great school and a great institution. Charlottesville is awesome. But I'm glad you found what you were looking for at Villanova. So do you have any other memories you want to share from your time there?
I think the big thing was for me is I knew since I was about 8 or 9 years old that I wanted to become a sports broadcaster. And when I got to Villanova, they had a student radio station. And when I got there, I remember so excited. And they're like, oh, we're shutting down our AM station. We're going to go to an FM station, but we're going to be closed the entire freshman year. But I met a guy who was a junior, and he said, Ryan, I know you're disappointed. You want to call games right now, but I know if you just stay around and we'll stay connected here. Remember, when I graduated, you might have a chance to move into being the sports director of the student station at Villanova. And the next year, the station was still shut down. They needed another year. So finally, he graduated. And my last 2 years there, I was able to call tons of games for the student radio. We raised money for local advertisers to be able to travel to California, Houston, Texas. It was an incredible experience at Villanova, not only on campus, but traveling around doing Villanova men's basketball games and football games on the road with my buddies. It was one of the greatest times of my life.
So I think that experience you had in radio there sort of influenced you almost directly into what your career was immediately after you graduated, because you worked in Philadelphia for Villanova for about 7 years after graduation. Tell us about how that came about and what you were doing there.
So I graduated in May of 1993, and I get letters of recommendation from the athletic director at Villanova, the head football coach, the head basketball coach. And the next thing I know, a month later after I graduated, they said, Ryan, we're going to take a chance on you. The color analyst had left to take a high school coaching job with the professional network. And it was just incredible luck and time. And I remember I was 22 at the time, and our head coach, Coach Talley, said, Ryan, I love your enthusiasm with the student radio. Put your name in the hat. I don't know if it will happen, but give it a shot. And a month after I graduated, they gave me a call and said that we're going to name you as the color analyst for Villanova's football radio network. And then I thought to myself, I can't believe I never thought in a million years my broadcasting career would actually start on the professional level at the school that I just did student radio for. I got an incredible lucky break, and then I would do some pregame and postgame for the basketball, and eventually land my all-time dream job as the play-by-play voice for Villanova basketball in 1998.
I want to come back to that in just a little bit, but it's amazing, and something I want to make sure our audience, especially the younger audience, can take from this is that, you say it was lucky, which it partly was, but I think people also have to realize it was your hard work in the radio work before that even got you to that opportunity, because if you hadn't done that, it's not as if you could have just thrown your hat in the ring, without having any experience. So I want people to understand that, yes, might have been luck, a little bit of luck that got you that role, but certainly it was your hard work before, and I think you'd probably attest to that as well.
I think so much for a lot of aspiring broadcasters, young women, young men that I talk to, I share with them how it's so important to ask for advice. You don't have to always ask for a job, but find people in the industry that you're really have a great interest towards going into and ask them for advice. And sometimes that could lead to an internship. It could lead to a job. You never know how that's going to sort of work itself out. And, during that time at Villanova, I ended up working 7 years from 1994 to 2001 in sports marketing full-time for the Villanova Athletic Department. And the only way I got that is because I did an internship with the Wildcat Club and then an internship in the athletic department before I got that full-time job. And just like I did pregame and postgame for the basketball before I eventually got the lead play-by-play job. So all these things are steps. Putting your head down, be passionate about what you do, and treat people good, and just hope that your time will come, that you'll get that break you need to continue to move forward in whatever endeavor you choose to do in life.
7 years, 2001, you start to get the itch to come back to Alexandria, your hometown. Tell us what prompted that move back to Virginia, and what did you do when you moved back?
So I had this really exciting time at Villanova. 7 years, the sports marketing, doing all the games, but I missed home. I missed being in Alexandria. I missed my friends. I missed my family. I loved my broadcasting career at Villanova. And I remember I had a talk with my family, specifically my brother Frank, who had been in the mortgage business. And he said, Ryan, why don't you consider coming back? I could hire you in the mortgage business all year round, but I can give you the flexibility during the football and basketball season at Villanova to travel up and to do the games. And I was like, that's it. That's perfect, because that way I could keep my Villanova broadcasting career that I loved, and I could also get back and be in my hometown that I loved. And it just was the perfect transition at that time in 2001 back to Alexandria.
So I know you've always had an affinity for BI and stayed connected. I know you did a couple things. You always played in the golf tournament when you came back. I know you mentioned that to me. But in 2007, you got a little bit more involved here. You took over as the varsity golf coach. This turned out to be a big year for you because you also married your wife, Laura Finnegan, who was a former BI administrator who you had met in 2001. So tell us about that time in your life specifically, and what really drew you back to Bishop Ireton in such a big way.
Well, you think about all these things in life and how this happens, and then because of that, this opportunity comes, whether it's to meet someone, whether it's a job. And for me, it was unbelievable because by coming back and getting involved at Ireton, I was actually asked to MC the varsity athletic banquet. And Laura Finnegan at the time, now my wife, Laura Fannon, was coordinating that along with the athletic director at the time, Mark Heiser. And I remember going out with them to a lunch and getting ready for the banquet. And then I came back for another event, and I kept in touch with Laura. I saw her at the golf tournament, and then we started dating, and it was unbelievable because now as I think about all of this, I mean, if I didn't that one moment go with your gut, and if there's another thing I can just say today, trust your gut. Like my gut feeling of that I was supposed to go to Ireton, even though I didn't even know if I could get in. It was so late. It was August, and fortunately they had the space at that time. My whole life, I mean, who knows where my life would have gone, but
we might have had a Ryan Fannon who was on the PGA Tour. We could have had a Ryan Fannon who was a Hollywood star. We could have had a number of Ryan Fannons, but I'm glad we got the Ryan Fannon we do. Okay, so around 2010, I know there was a big push at Bishop Ireton to bolster alumni engagement and outreach, and you were approached because you had been here as the golf coach. You'd been involved in emceeing events and staying connected that way. You were approached about taking on a full-time role at the school. Can you describe what you were thinking then, your feelings about jumping back in here at your alma mater?
Life has cycles for everything. And the mortgage business and my brother giving me that chance was a great opportunity for me. But I wasn't feeling it anymore. I wasn't passionate about it. I was thinking like, what might be my next step? And the principal at the time, Tim Hamer, and the director of advancement, Terry Rainey, they approached me and they said, Ryan, we know you have this career at Villanova, but we're looking to really bolster our alumni relations, and we're looking for someone that could come in full time and really get a lot of alumni events going, not only here, but when you travel with Villanova for football and basketball, you can get a chance to meet and see our St. Mary's Academy alumni and our Bishop Ireton alumni all around the country. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is like the perfect job for me, because I felt like you always want to take a job when you think the timing's good to be able to make a difference. And I knew that Ireton had done a little bit of events here and there, but they didn't have a robust alumni relations at the time. And I remember coming in and I remember thinking, let's just fill the calendar. You know, the fundraising and all of that, I remember that because I grew up in a philanthropic family where they were like, it's not always about donations. It's about having people feel connected to something. And I remember the first thing I thought of when I got the job, we got to be doing 2-3 events a month, and we got to get people, feeling engaged as alumni. And then if they want to give from a monetary standpoint, great. If they don't, that's fine too. They can just feel connected to this great school, Bishop Ireton. And when I started that job full time in 2010, little did I know here, 15 years later, I would still be at Ireton in the advancement office. It's been an incredible 15 years at my alma mater. I've cherished it greatly.
And I want to take a little time to talk about the two major projects that you've been here for, because the first major project, I think, was the auditorium and K-Wing expansion in the late 90s. So you weren't here then, but you have been here for two major projects, which the first one I want to talk about is the campaign for the 41,000 square foot academic center, which opened its doors in 2020. You were here at the very beginning of that project and were deeply involved in fundraising for it. So can you talk about your initial impressions of the project when it was first discussed at the 50th anniversary of the school in 2014? That was 10 years ago from now that we're celebrating our 60th anniversary. And then the silent phase of fundraising that kicked off in June 2015.
So very interesting when you think about this, Josh. There was the exact footprint of the Oblate House where the Oblates lived until 2008. And it became like a de facto office administration building. There was like a classroom at the bottom.
Yeah, they didn't really know how to use it, right?
Right, exactly. It just wasn't really, after the Oblates left, it didn't have a lot of great use. But that footprint was exactly what Ireton needed. As the school moving forward, the cafeteria was so small and the library was so small, and they needed new classrooms for sciences and languages. And when you think about this new building and how it's changed Bishop Ireton forever, unbelievable what happened with that project. To think about the cafeteria now, which is Murphy Hall, is 2.5 times the size of the old cafeteria. Helmuth Library, now 4 times the size of what the old library was.
And I think if you ever went in that old library, you would be shocked at what the new library is, because it's incredible. I mean, the old library felt like a single room. This feels like a true library.
It's funny you say that, Josh, because they used to have to shut down the library if they would bring a classroom in. Now you walk into Helmuth Library, and the first thing you see is a classroom to the right of Helmuth Library as you come into it. It's been a game changer, and the kids here now, they take such pride in this building. It's been incredible. And then you think about the top floor and the science and the language classrooms and the ability for this new project and the people that supported this project. I mean, it was an incredible task to end up having to raise over $6 million. It took over 6 years. So many people. If I started naming them, it would take too long.
That'd be a whole podcast.
There was so many people that were involved in this, but it was amazing because when Kathleen McNutt became the new head of school, the project was still not completed. And when she came in and was able to put her touch from a lot of experience that she had with projects over at St. Louis Catholic Grade School before she came here, where she was the principal, it was able to just finish it off in such a high level and in a way that has set up the school for decades to come.
I think what some people might not know is that Bishop Ireton, where it is in Alexandria, there's not really room to expand out. You know, we have a limited amount of space. We don't have a lot of land. So I think this project in particular was so important because you took what was a building that was being unused and you built on that space. So you didn't have to have additional land. And I think that was probably, I'm curious, was when the project was first unveiled, if that was part of the excitement, was to say, hey, we can use what space we have here to build something bigger.
And the perfect example, like walk through the old cafeteria and see all the new classrooms and the kiln and all of the things that they've been able to do for the exact space that used to be something else and all across campus. Another great example is the old boiler rooms. You'd walk in and it was just storage and these high ceilings. And I remember the vision of several of the folks that were part of the campaign to say, we could possibly get an auxiliary gym in this space. And I remember thinking, how? Like the neighborhood's right there and there's boiler rooms. Where is the space going to be? And now you walk by and having a second gym has meant to this school to be able to have that. That was a huge part of that project, to be able to build the auxiliary gym.
And Bennett Court, beautiful.
Absolutely. And so many people in this community that supported this project at unprecedented levels to make this happen. I know everybody that drives up Cambridge Road that was part of that project at the beginning, middle, or end takes incredible pride on what that project has done to change Ireton forever.
Which is a great segue, because now when you drive up Cambridge Road, or even further back, you can see this from the Beltway. We're in the midst of another project now, huge project, but we're now in the midst and closing in on the completion of the top to bottom renovation of the St. Francis de Sales Chapel. We're seeing progress on it daily as we come into work at the school. In fact, sometimes you'll come in the morning and then it'll look different when you leave in the evening, which is kind of crazy to think about. So can you talk about the fundraising aspect of this project, and then sort of more generally, your excitement for the completed project?
Well, first of all, when you think about the fact that this chapel will be a visible and beautiful spiritual centerpiece of the school and the community, that really stands out to me, because the chapel in its own right, it had a flat roof and you couldn't really see where the chapel was. You would go into it and, for many, many years, you'd have the chance to go in there and many masses and a chance to go in there and just take some time to reflect. And it was always a wonderful gathering place, as any chapel is at a school. But this renovation is literally with the gabled roof and the tower. It is going to just bring that spiritual presence physically to Ireton like it's never been. And in our world today, our faith is more important than maybe ever. And to be able to know that this is going to be a project that is based on our faith and is going to be something that's going to impact the community in a huge way, it just gives so much great satisfaction to all of us here at Ireton and all those that have supported this project as we come down the end of this project. And I love the name, our campaign slogan, honoring our faith, building on tradition. It says it very well.
We're literally building on the space that was. So the actual structure is the same, and they gutted it, and then they're putting all these beautiful additions onto it. So I think that project will be something special when it's finished, and we've had support from all across, including from the diocese on this project too. All right, Ryan, I want to shift a little bit here because I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about your other role that you've mentioned a couple times here, the voice of Villanova football and basketball. And if people were wondering how we picked you to host this podcast regularly, they need look no further than your decades of experience as the play-by-play commentator for Villanova Radio. I'm sure we could fill an entire podcast with your experience there, but first I want you to just talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned a little bit about how you got started. So first tell us the football story and then how that transitioned into calling basketball as well. Got that football first opportunity in 1993, and this past just few weeks, I finished my 32nd year of broadcasting Villanova football. We had a chance to win a national championship in 2009 at the FCS level. They used to call it 1AA, and that was an experience I'll never forget down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when we beat Montana, the Grizzlies, back in 2009. And then for Villanova basketball, I had an incredible opportunity to broadcast all
of Villanova's games for 21 years of the 27 I've been doing it when Jay Wright was the head coach, considered one of the greatest coaches of all time in college basketball. And I remember when I first got the play-by-play job for basketball, I thought if there's any way I could call one Final Four in my life, it would be a dream come true. And then because of Jay Wright, I got to call 4 Final Fours and 2 national championship games, including a national championship buzzer beater to beat the North Carolina Tar Heels back in 2016 in Houston, Texas.
Which is really cool. And not only is Jay Wright a good coach, one of the greatest, but also a great guy as well, which makes your job a little bit easier having to deal with someone like that. So I want to talk a little bit about that first national championship you called, because the clip of you calling the buzzer beater is amazing.
So here we go. 4.7 seconds to go. Villanova 74, North Carolina 74. Jenkins to inbound 94 feet from the Wildcat bucket. Looking to inbound, finds Arcidiacono. 3 seconds to go. Across the timeline, 2 seconds to go. Jenkins 3, right wing to win it. He made it! He made the 3 from the right wing at the buzzer. Cats win it all! Cats win it all! Cats win it all! 31 years later, Villanova is the king of college basketball once again. Final score, Villanova 77, North Carolina 74. You gotta love it.
Can you talk about what you were feeling in those moments? It had been 31 years since they'd won the 1985 championship. And so not only was the team on the biggest stage they could possibly, but so were you. And so I imagine you might have had some nerves going into calling that game. And then, of course, it comes down to the wire and you have to make this big call at the end that people are listening to. So tell us about what that was like.
I could never even begin to explain on a podcast the emotion that I felt at that moment. And when Marcus Page hit like a circus off-balance 3 to tie the game with 4.7 seconds to go, thank goodness Villanova called timeout, because I don't know if the team needed it, but the play-by-play guy did. And I remember catching my breath and just thinking about what the longtime play-by-play announcer at UConn that had called a bunch of national championship games had told me many years ago. He said, Ryan, remember, when you get to a real big moment in a game and you're going to call the last few seconds of a game, you have to remember and you have to think about it that put your emotions aside. You can be enthusiastic, he said, but you have to be able to know that if somebody's driving in the car or listening to you anywhere, you have to be able to give them the fundamentals first, the score, the time, where's the ball. The quote was, stay with the play. So when Villanova inbounded with 4.7 seconds to go, the last thing in my mind was, do your job, stay with the call, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But being a guy that went to Villanova, and here we are in a tie game for the national championship, looking back, I think if I didn't have the amount of years of experience from 1998 to 2016, I needed every bit of those years of experience to be able to get that call out, get it out pretty clean, and then be able to just have the emotion of the moment after it went through to say the rest that I know you mentioned.
The Cats win. Cats
win it all.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And maybe they should think about that. Give the broadcasters a timeout. Just one they can throw in there sometime.
I needed it that night.
Exactly. All right, so as we start to wrap things up here, I know we could talk about Villanova for hours, but I want to bring this full circle back to Bishop Ireton. You worked here for 15 years now as Associate Director of Advancement. You met your wife here. You have 3 kids, 2 of whom are current students here, and 1 who I'm sure is a future Cardinal. You have a passion for this school that is truly, and I mean this, unlike almost anyone else I've ever met. So as the school celebrates its 60th anniversary this year, big picture, 10,000-foot view, Ryan, I want to hear from you. What are you most excited about for the future on Cambridge Road?
I would say the thing I'm most excited about is the unprecedented momentum that Bishop Ireton has right now. You know, it's been almost 40 years since I came here in 1985 as a freshman, and there has never been a time, not even close, that we've had a combination of incredible leadership, top-notch facilities, community engagement, school spirit, enrollment growth. I mean, I could just think of so many things that we have right now that have this unbelievable momentum. And I think that in life, so much about is the opportunity of who you get to work with and the leadership around you. And what Kathleen McNutt has done for this school since she arrived in 2019, it's all those things that I said has a lot to do with her leadership. Because when your leader sets the tone the way she does, everybody knows that we're going to do big things, and that's the way Ireton is. And I think it just brings everybody. We have a very hardworking community, but I think it takes everybody to a whole new level. And I will say specifically in advancement, because I've been here for a long time in advancement. Chris Gilliland, that's been here now in his 8th year as the director of advancement, his leadership and his ability to really put together an unbelievable team that has grown, and the structure that he has brought our advancement has helped us in a massive way grow philanthropically. And Ireton right now is positioned for all of these reasons and more. You can just talk about the growth of athletics and enrollment and leadership. You think about all these things combined, and as we celebrate our 60 years, I feel like the best is yet to come, but the Cardinal right now is soaring really high.
I appreciate you staying in the play, answering that question because you gave a really succinct answer there, and I think that's really important for people to hear. So lastly, when you think about your life, you made this decision in 1985 to come to Bishop Ireton, change the course of your life, I think it's fair to say. So I just want to ask you, just lastly, what has this school in place meant to you, and what will it mean moving forward?
I can't even begin to explain what Bishop Ireton has meant to me. They say you grow up a lot in high school, but I truly feel that I have been so lucky and blessed to be a Cardinal for life. Meeting my wife here, I mean, all these things of my Ireton experience, but really the greatest thing was meeting Laura and marrying her, because there's no way I would have been able to do all I've done in my life without having Laura as sort of that rock, being an incredible wife and an amazing mother, and just supporting me in all these different things that I've tried to do that have allowed me to follow my passion. Having now my son Ryan Jr. here as a sophomore and my daughter Maggie as a freshman, and seeing their own unique Cardinal student experiences. And my 4th grade daughter, Grace, who's over at St. Louis, and hopefully she'll be a future Cardinal. And when I think about all of that, it's just amazing. And putting that all in perspective of what Ireton's meant to me in my life, it was that time as a student, and then my professional life and my family life, and all of it coming full circle in a faith-filled community like Bishop Ireton. I don't think I could have possibly scripted it any better for myself, and I just feel really blessed to be able to call Ireton my home.
That's Ryan Fannon, BI class of 1989, the Associate Director of Advancement, and a lifelong Cardinal with an unmatched passion for Bishop Ireton. I'm Josh Goldman, and you've been listening to Bishop Ireton's Real World Wednesdays.